Hello students, welcome back to the second Writers Workshop, and I'm sure it's no surprise to you that in college much of your college evaluation is going to be based on writing essays. Well, today in this Writers Workshop we're going to talk about a very basic format for writing an essay, a 5-paragraph essay. Again, many students have a lot of practice with this, but it may have been a while. And I'm just like I talked about in the previous Writers Workshop about the paragraph, if you can master the 5-paragraph essay, you can write a 10-page research paper, no problem, because this you can just create an expanded version of this format. So it's very foundational and fundamental to being an effective college writer. So we're going to go through the parts of that today. So first of all, just a little introduction of why it's important. As I stated, essay basics don't change. You always have to have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So if you can master that in 5 paragraphs, you can write a 10-page paper, no problem, with these kind of foundational ideas. Again, here are your 5 paragraphs. I'm thinking this looks pretty familiar to most of you. You have an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. And of course, if you were assigned a very lengthy paper, you would just simply be adding in body paragraphs there. So this is a very basic format that we're going to go over these paragraphs today to remind you of just some best practices of the different parts of the 5-paragraph essay. First of all, an introduction. You know, every paper you write in college needs some type of introduction, and there are 4 parts to an effective introduction. Again, you know, sometimes an instructor will ask for something specific in a certain part of the paper. You always want to defer to specific instructor guidelines, but these are kind of the basic parts of an introduction that I think any student can work with in any course. First of all, you need to begin with some type of hook. A hook is an attention grabber. You want your reader to want to read your essay, and if he's fallen asleep at the beginning of it, well, that's not a good sign. You want something, a quality piece of information to start with. So we're going to talk about hooks today. You want to give a little bit of explanation of why you used that hook, so add some relevance to that. You want to set up your reader to understand your paper, so you need a little background information. And finally, you need a thesis, which is going to state your main point of your paper. If you have those 4 things in an introduction, you're going to have no problem with that. So we're going to run through each of these here. First of all, a hook. You know, great ideas for hooks. These are 3 that kind of work all the time. One of them could be like a surprising fact or statistic. Another one might be a quotation from a famous person or a person who's particularly knowledgeable about that topic you're going to write about. Another technique is an anecdote. An anecdote is a little story that you can tell to kind of get your reader into the topic. I always tell my students, you can make up an anecdote, just a few little sentences, make up a little story that would be relevant to that topic. So these are used at the very beginning of an introduction. They establish a connection between the writer and the reader because they get the reader's attention. So we're going to look at some of those. We're going to look at that at work here in just a moment. Another critical part of an introduction is a thesis statement. Again, a few rules of thumb about a thesis statement for any paper. It needs to be 1 clear sentence. Okay, it states the topic and the main point. Now this should sound familiar because remember we talked about a topic sentence for a paragraph in the previous Writers Workshop. A thesis is just kind of an expanded version of that. It should make a claim that needs to be proven. Okay, you need to state it in a way so your paper has somewhere to go. All right, and you want to put it at the end of your introduction. Now, I do realize that sometimes students are taught to maybe put it in other places in an introduction, but I always tell students, put your thesis at the end of your introduction. Essentially work your way into it from the beginning of your intro to the end. I think that's the right place to put it. So we're going to look at an example of an introduction with some of this at work here. Remember, it had 4 parts. That's why you see 4 colors on your screen here in this paragraph. So in black, you're going to see the hook. In red, I'm going to add some relevance to the hook. Then I'm going to give in blue kind of a little background information, and then I'm going to end in green with my thesis. Now this is only a 4-sentence introduction. It's obviously very short. You could expand this, but I typically tell students that introductions and conclusions should be fairly brief. The body of your paper is where you want the bulk of your writing. You don't want some big long introduction and then a really short body paragraph. It should be the other way around. So I typically tell students, maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 sentences for an intro. That's about it. So let's take a look at this one. Lack of reading proficiency is the #1 challenge for American college students, according to Jan Jones, editor of College Reading Journal. This statement shows the importance of preparing students for college-level reading. Unfortunately, many high school teachers are not trained as reading teachers. States should mandate that all high school teachers should complete reading training as part of their certification. So I have hook, which is a quotation from a knowledgeable person. I have in red some explanation of my hook. In blue, I'm giving my reader a little background information about why this topic is important. And finally, in green, I have my clearly stated 1-sentence thesis. Again, it's a really short intro, but it accomplishes all 4 parts. You can use that for any paper, any course. It'll work, okay? So this should look familiar. There's your 8-sentence paragraph that we talked about in the previous writer's workshop. Now, why did I use the McDonald's symbol? Because why do people love McDonald's? Why can you be driving anywhere in the United States or even the world and see McDonald's and people go there? Because it's familiar, because it works. Their food is always the same wherever you go, and it always works. That's why this format works all the time. If you stick with this, you can rely on it, okay? So this is that body paragraph, and it shouldn't look unfamiliar because we just talked about it in the previous writer's workshop. So again, these can be expanded for longer papers, but this is a format that can get you writing a well-organized body paragraph every time. Here's an example of a body paragraph that would go with that thesis we just talked about training teachers better to be better teachers of reading. So let's take a look at this. Notice I indented, that's something important, and I also want you to look for those transitional words too, because I put them in here. One reason why all high school teachers should complete reading training is that all classes require reading. For example, in history classes, students will have to read about wars and other world events. It's important to understand these historical events so that students will appreciate the past as they live in the present, making them better citizens. In addition, science courses will have required reading. Science is complex, and without adequate reading skills, students will not understand how the world and the body work. Even math courses will require reading. Students will learn much by reading about famous mathematicians to understand their theories and formulas. Reading is an important skill in all courses, and all teachers would benefit from training that focused on helping students read better. So again, that is an 8-sentence body paragraph. I've got my 3 examples in there. I've explained each example. I've got my topic sentence and my concluding sentence that state the same main point. And did you catch my transitional words? Notice, for example, in addition, words like that help my writing flow better and connect my ideas. So that format will work all day long for any paper. Now, you know, for papers you have to write a conclusion. Just like you had to have a concluding sentence for a paragraph, you have to write a conclusion for an essay. Again, I recommend brief conclusions, just like I recommend brief introductions. You have specific things you must do in a conclusion, but you don't want to go on because that takes away from the body paragraphs where you really have the heart of the information. So again, there's no magic number of sentences, but sometimes you can accomplish a conclusion in 4, 5, 6 sentences. So remember, you need to restate your main point, which is your thesis, give a little summary of your paper's main points, reconnect with that original hook. Go back and look at what you used for your hook in your intro and bring that full circle in your conclusion. And just end with something for readers to think about. One thing that I see students do in writing sometimes in conclusions is they'll bring up something new that wasn't addressed in the paper in any way. Don't do that. Your conclusion is a time to wrap things up, not to bring up anything new. So let's go ahead and take a conclusion. Again, we're going to stick with this same topic about reading training for teachers. So again, notice my 4 colors, okay? State mandated reading training for all teachers should be required because so many students are struggling to read well and reading proficiency affects students' success. More attention should be focused on this training. Unfortunately, lacking reading skills will hinder success in college as well, which could have lasting impacts for students. Teacher training should return to the fundamental basics of reading or risk the future of America's students. So again, color-coded it so you could see the different parts of the conclusion, and you see that I just kind of summarized my main points, I restated my thesis, and I tried to end with something to really make people think about that topic. Okay, so again, the 5-paragraph essay, it's a very simple, basic essay format. It can be expanded for any paper, but it's always going to have the same 3 parts: intro, body, conclusion, and you've got to have those parts for any well-written college essay. So I hope this was a good refresher on writing a good essay, and I'll see you in the next Writer's Workshop.